Christchurch Central MP Duncan Webb and Ilam MP Hamish Campbell are with me now. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time.
Great to be here.
Good morning, Chris.
Let me start with you, Duncan. The BSA has been accused of unprecedented power grab after claiming it has the right to regulate online platforms like The Platform. Should the BSA close down?
Oh, look, I saw your rant on this, Chris. Can't imagine why you'd have a particular point of view. Look, the question, firstly, there's one important thing, and that is that information that is broadcast and presented as news should meet some standards, right? Because we want it to be accurate. We don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
We don't want fiction to be out there. And the question is how we achieve that. So the way we've achieved that to date is through the Broadcasting Standards Authority, which can regulate any broadcast, which includes a broadcast by any means of telecommunication, that's going out to the public. It's actually a really technical question whether programs like this are captured or not. Is this broadcast by means of telecommunication? And I think most people would say yes. Now, if you want people who are broadcasting live, including through things like Facebook Lives, it's a long arm. We need to look at the law. So, look, I'm not saying we should shut down the Broadcasting Standards Authority. I actually think it's quite important. But we do need probably to have a look at, in the modern age, exactly what that reach should be. Because you, for example, present yourself and say you're a journalist, and that's all good by me. But if you're going to say that, you've got to meet some standards, and someone's got to impose those standards.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Hamish, what do you make of this? Because I think Duncan makes a good point, is that we need some standards in news to make sure that what we're getting is trusted. And can I just say that I've got a 100% trusted news rating from NewsGuard, which is an internationally accredited organisation. Thank you very much. Can I also say that I bet Stuff and RNZ, in terms of the rating, that comes with a long list of criteria, including who owns you. So just for the record. But I think Duncan makes a good point, and that is, and what do you define to be a broadcast? And that is, there are plenty of people that pretend to be newscasters now across New Zealand that are on TikTok, and they say the most appalling things, and in fact they can sometimes get away with it. And you actually look at, I think it was an article and Stuff that had to say that there was some rich lister that was being accused of some horrific crimes, and he was actually innocent and didn't do those crimes. But of course, people on TikTok believe everything they see and read, so there is a danger there. So who polices that?
Chris, I think you've actually raised a valid point. We do need to have standards. Of course, the BSA has traditionally focused on radio and television. There are a number of outlets which are now solely online, including yourself. And I think we do need to have this discussion about kind of who and how we kind of regulate some of it. When you look at some of the younger demographics in society, maybe kind of our school students, our university students, if you ask them how they get their media, most of them will tell you they get it through TikTok. So I think and even we see in some of the older generations, they're turning away from mainstream media and going to more online platforms. So I think this is something that we really need to have a discussion about.
I don't disagree. The boss, though, of the BSA accused Winston Peters of being, quote, a tad dramatic. But then again, Duncan, here's somebody who doesn't like hurty words like mumbo jumbo and decided to start things. I think the whole principle of having a look into this is good, I think the whole principle of looking into this, the wider issue context that we're discussing, is important. But they've chosen the most pathetic example to start the conversation, haven't they?
Well, I just think it's hilarious that someone's called out for calling Winston Peters a tad dramatic. That is the understatement of the year. He is a master of theatre, is what he is. But look, it is a bit of a storm in a teacup. Sean Plunkett does put some stuff on his other thing. That's pretty out there, and accuracy is important. And you've got to remember, a lot of people do follow him and other similar platforms like your own. And so I do think we need to have some holding to account, because the kind of fallback position, which is, if he says something about me that's palpably untrue, I have to go through the courts and get an injunction and take down and all this sort of stuff. It just is too slow, unwieldy and expensive. So we do need something like it to manage it. We've got NetSafe, but again, that's not really the right tool for this kind of activity. So, yeah, I think it's actually a really good point, and it's good that it's been raised. Hopefully, the government's going to move very quickly to address it.
Yeah, I think it does need to move quickly to address the wider implications, what this means for people who do use the likes of, Facebook Lives. I mean, I don't know, are you going to, what about if you get caught out for doing one of your cooking series, Duncan, and you might say something, but I guess, I think Sean Pluggy had...
I mislead on that all the time because, I go down to the New World and buy a cake and then pretend I've made it, right?
That's a really good idea. That's actually, I must try that myself. I mean, this does raise so many interesting questions, and I think you're right when it comes to news broadcasts. There should be some sort of standards, but I think when I was talking to Sean Plunker the other day, he raised an interesting point that under the current regime, perhaps that some of the hard left trolls will try to use the BSA to silence people whose voices they disagree with. And this is probably a good example of that. I mean, for goodness sake, mumbo jumbo and the BSA loses its mind. So I think there is some, how do we make sure that the current platforms that we use are not being used for malicious purposes?
I used to have a job. My job was handling complaints against lawyers. And one of the things about complaints handling is there's always a large number of complaints that entirely lack merit, right?
Right.
They're vexatious complaints. And one of the jobs of the BSA is to weed those out. They've got a power to turn them around and simply say, there's no substance to this. We're not even going to, make an inquiry into it. And if you're a left-wing troll and you don't like, someone calling Duncan Webb a rampant socialist, well, that's not a complaint. Yeah,
because it's true.
Political discourse and true.
Also, Chris, I think we draw the line, especially online, as who's a broadcaster, who's just an average punter having a crack online. And I think society, we do need to have a discussion about this, because I think we're losing the ability to disagree agreeably. And I think that is a sad state of affairs.
It is. Let's move on to some more serious news. ChrisLynchMedia.com broke the story of this convicted paedophile serving 18.5-year prison sentence for decades of sexual abuse against young girls. He was allowed to get married inside Rolleston Prison last week. The wedding, or the ceremony, was approved by the Corrections Department under its current policy, which permits inmates to marry if it does not compromise the safety of prison security. When I found this out from a source, I was dumbfounded, to be honest with you, because I didn't realise that, you can get married if the other person puts in writing, yes, I'd like to marry a convicted paedophile. But I guess this does raise the point about, Hamish, to you on this first, that the National Party always claims to be tough on crime and tough on sentences, and here we have a man who has committed some of the most serious crimes imaginable, getting married inside prison in an actual ceremony where the bride wears a wedding dress and everything like that. I mean, really?
Look, this does seem a bit of a weird one, and it clearly is objectionable, really. And I think kind of if you've done the crime, you do the time. Actually, you lose some of your rights. So that's how our legal system kind of works. We remove your right to move freely in the community if you've done a crime. So I don't know whether it's something you can actually legislate against, but it does seem quite weird, this one.
Duncan, what are your claims on this? Or your thoughts rather? Does the right to marry extend to those guilty of the most serious crimes, sexual crimes, and should the privilege be restricted given the nature of this man's offending? Because it's a privilege to marry somebody, isn't it?
Well, it is a privilege to find someone who will marry you.
Well, yeah.
That's look, I've got to be cautious here. I don't think this is the biggest issue facing New Zealand today. But I do think we need to think about what prison is for and what it's about. I make a point of visiting prisons. I've been to Rolleston Prison and Christchurch Men's and a number of others. They're grim places. Being put into a 6 square metre cell for 21 hours a day is a pretty tough punishment. Now, Rolleston's not as grim as perhaps Christchurch Men's, but you're still incarcerated. Every movement of your day is limited. And so we strip rights from prisoners in that sense. the right to marry is, we do have a right to marry. If we've got somebody who wants to marry us, then I don't think we should be stripping that right from prisoners, because we take the liberty. And look, if they want to have a relationship, they've formed a relationship, one that's going to be supportive and perhaps helpful when they get out of prison to make sure they don't reoffend, a person of support for them. Well, let's let them build healthy relationships which can perhaps flourish. That's what visiting's for. That's what telephone calls are for. So, look, honestly, I'm not going to lie awake at bed at night worrying that people get married in prison. It actually happens, not infrequently. And I don't think we should be taking rights other than liberty away from prisoners.
Apparently she was chasing him for a long time. I suppose that speaks volumes. I want to move on.
That odd. No, I do find that odd.
Yeah.
But that's not...
Yeah, so do I. Yes. She outed herself on my page and had to quickly hide and delete her comments. So I didn't think it was probably appropriate. But anyway, I need to move on. The Speaker of the House, Jerry Brownlee, has announced plans to tighten parliamentary standards. Thank God for this. I'm getting a bit sick of Te Pāti Māori MPs thinking they can hijack the place and do their songs and everything. I mean, and I'll be called a racist, that's fine, but this is not about that. I mean, I actually quite enjoy the haka every time I see it on television. It gives me chills. But there's a time and place, and also there's a time and place to respect the rules of Parliament and the House, and it seems Te Pāti Māori has a problem with doing this. Hamish Campbell, to you on that. I mean, they do like to show disrespect, and everything seems to be for the TikTok generation. Look at me, and look, it works. I mean, you've got one Te Pāti Māori MP who's outright lied before, and now she's on the front page, or getting, Time magazine recognition. I mean, so in some respects, they're doing something that works, and it's called attention. But is it for the right place at the right time?
I like how Duncan's busy tried to tidy himself up for the section.
I was like, why is he taking off his clothes? Very nice, Duncan.
I think, Chris, what we do need to differentiate here, that the disruption this week, it's not about the haka and it's not about the Waiata. It's actually about the time and the process. It was agreed by the business committee to actually have the maiden speech at 3:00, which is different to normal. Normally it's done just before the dinner break. So if it runs over, it goes into the dinner break. It was that there was going to be the maiden statement. Within 15 minutes, it was going to be the maiden statement and the Waiata, and it was going to end after 15 minutes. That went on to pretty much close to half an hour, which actually ate into the time of the business of the House. And we do have a limited time to legislate and pass laws in New Zealand. We are busy trying to make sure that we're making the country as best place that we possibly can, and when it's being held up with something like that, that is a problem. Now, of course, I think it's quite a good thing that the Speaker is looking into the standards in the House. If you look at the National Party, we always wear ties and suits. And to give Duncan credit, the Labour Party mainly do wear respectable clothing. Ties offered not, but I think kind of it's maybe some of the other parties that the dress sense has probably kind of fallen away. T-shirts, slogans on T-shirts.
Bring some respect back to Parliament, for goodness sake. I can't stop looking at Duncan. He's just looks so attractive with his top button done up. I'm distracted, Hamish.
It's a huge honour to be a member of Parliament.
Yeah.
And it is a serious place that does serious things, and I think we should respect that.
Duncan, Webb, Brownlee said the incident showed a disrespect for the process, and he has signalled changes around attendance, dress codes, and to restore some kind of order and dignity in Parliament. Do you agree with this sentiment?
Yeah, I do actually agree with this sentiment. Attendance is another one where, parties have members who do different things around the country on sitting days, so you don't have everyone there all the time. Of course, the other night, I don't know if you followed it, Chris, but the other night the National Party didn't muster enough people in Parliament to pass some legislation. They only had 15 people in Parliament itself, and the legislation couldn't be passed, had to be pushed across to the next week, which is outrageous. But so attendance is important. And
there was some
Well played. But the other thing is, let's not play into Pāti Māori's hands. They love to get a sort of performance out of this. And look, MPs get elected from across the community. And Rawe wears his hat and so on the Green Party, they wear some pretty flamboyant clothes as well. So I don't think the clothing thing is as important as, just having respectful behaviour. And when you do go in and you agree some parameters around how things will work, and then you entirely disregard them, I think you've got to be held to account for that. And as Jerry Brownlee put it very well, when he just simply said it's not about waiata and haka, they are both quite common in this house, as they should be. But we organise that so that we can also fit in the business of passing laws and scrutinising the government.
Just while we're on to Pāti Māori, I feel like they're trying very, very hard to appear moderate, but the horse has bolted now, and it's, let's be honest, they've exposed themselves to what they want to be seen initially, and that is radicals, and it's going to be very hard to change that to become more moderate in the next election, isn't it, Hamish Campbell?
Oh, yeah, look, I think what we're seeing is total chaos in Pāti Māori. It looks like there's in effect going to be two parties kind of split out of that. And I think it's up to Labour to rule out working with them because that's their coalition partners.
Duncan, would you, if you could give your boss, Chris Hipkins, some advice, would you say, can you rule out working with the radicals?
Look, I don't think I'll be telling Chippy what to do on Chris Lynch Media, but I will say this. That after the election, we'll know what the sentiment of New Zealand is. And the influence that any given party has on government should be proportionate to the amount of votes that they get. And in the current government, when we've got, the attack on Māori, which has given rise to the Māori Party, and you've got the regulatory standards bill, which 99% of people don't want, and yet the government's pushing on because ACT demanded it. We've got things like tax cuts for tobacco companies because New Zealand First wanted it. Who's running this country at the moment? It's not the National Party, who in fact got most of the...
Actually, Hamish, I think Duncan... Hamish, I do think Duncan makes a good point, is that some of National's policies, the coalition government policies, has given rise to a more radical interpretation of the Māori Party's politics. So perhaps the government coalition's only got itself to blame in that respect. What do you say, Hamish Campbell?
No, look, and this attack on Māori is absolute rubbish. We are trying to lift the standard of living for all New Zealanders, Māori and non-Māori, and that is not an attack on Māori. We want to actually make sure everybody has better healthcare, better education, and a better quality of life. And we've seen in the latest education announcements, we've actually seen a lifting of the achievement of Māori. And so I think what we saw under the previous government, we saw that slipping away, and we are making sure that actually everybody in New Zealand can reach their full potential. And I think kind of education is a great place to start.
On that point, Duncan,
I've got to say this. Treaty Principles Bill, removing te reo from the public service, abolishing the Māori Health Authority.
You can add removing co-governance.
Marine Coastal Areas Act. The list is long, and Māori are angry, and rightly so.
Yeah. Duncan, you can also add removing co-governance from things as well, because we believe everybody should actually have a fair share of life.
Abolishing Māori wards.
Yep, because everybody is an individual and should be treated equally.
Changing the words on the passports from from te reo to English, and anyway, I thought that was a
frightening word.
Anyway, I want to move on to something equally frightening for you, Duncan, perhaps. That's the resource consent that was granted for the Woolworths supermarket and retail centre on Madras Street. Did you like that bad segue in St Albans? Most locals, I think, support this new service, but you at the time were unhappy, and I'm trying to remind myself, Duncan, it was because of the resource consent process, the need to allegedly fast-track things, not so much the supermarket, right? So how do you feel about it now, knowing that it's got the green light and finally people around the area will have a massive supermarket? Are you feeling slightly happier, or are you losing sleep over this one?
Oh, look, it went through the right process in the end, right? They were trying to get it across the line without full, wide and public consultation. I think you're right that on balance, the local community are happy with the supermarket. I will say one thing, though. Isn't it a pain that it's a bloody Woolworths? Wouldn't it be great if we had an independent supermarket who could genuine competition, because it's going to be rough, pretty much the same as all of the other supermarkets in the area, which, have this kind of cozy relationship. It won't bring down prices. It will make it easier for people in the local neighbourhood to perhaps walk to the supermarket. But, again, I don't lose sleep over much, Chris.
I struggle to sleep, Duncan. No.
Oh, there you
Hamish,
go.
what do you reckon? I mean, is this, at the end of the day, is this a positive thing, more supermarkets? It seems like the whole of Canterbury is getting a supermarket every day now.
Look, I think it is positive. The more supermarkets are, then it leads to more competition. Sure, it'd be great to have another player in the market, and we're trying to make sure we can have a regulatory environment which would encourage that as much as possible. We need to kind of drive our grocery prices down. We've seen food inflation. It's fallen to 4.1%, but that's still an increase. I think it was up to 12.5 under Duncan's government. So we are making progress in that area. But it is far too hard to build supermarkets in New Zealand. It's a challenging thing. If you look at trying to set up a supermarket in an established suburb, you've got to buy the land and then, of course, go through quite tricky consent procedures to actually be able to build it. And I think we need more supermarkets in New Zealand to actually help with competition.
I love a good brand new supermarket. It's like going to Disneyland. Have you been to the supermarket Pack and Save on Papanui? No, what is it near Papanui? It's very flash, very fancy.
It's pretty close to where I live, actually, so I've been there a few times.
It's like my Friday night date. It's beautiful. We're out of time. Christchurch Central MP Duncan Webb and Ilam MP Hamish Campbell, thank you very much for your time this morning. Have a lovely weekend.
Excellent. Same to you. Have a great weekend.